Welcome. We have Caleb, you might be our most famous guest that we've ever
Oh,
had on. I mean, in the top, and it's been too long. We should have had you on long before this. I know you got to chat with Geo in New York, which was awesome. So we have with us the infamous, is he famous or infamous? CalebParker. If you know, you know. He is the CEO at Brave Corp and the host of the Brave Ideas podcast. And we are both big fans of Caleb and his podcast. If you don't know Caleb, you can listen to the podcast and follow him on LinkedIn. He's prolific on LinkedIn. Caleb, we'll have you give us the brief CalebParker story.
before that, I'm going to
Oh,
say, I think we're going to go with infamous on this side of the pond
okay.
and famous on the other side of the pond. That's
Okay,
not
great.
fair?
Well,
Wait, I was
thank you
trying
very
to
much.
remember. I'm sure you've not been on my podcast before, but I was somewhere and got to ask you, like, how do you have this accent? Because I could not piece it together. Like, how do you have sort of this like Southern accent, but you're British? So
Well, I think we've had some Zoom calls before, and that's
yeah,
probably where
that's probably when
those
it came
in.
up. Yeah.
But I'm actually not British. I'm full-blooded, in my heart, American. I've got American flag sitting over here, But I do live in London. I'm from Georgia in the U.S. I've been in the UK for about a little over 10 years now. So my accent's a little bit different. It's weird. But I think I have to give probably a shout out to Ryan Simonetti and Jamie Handari for being the most famous people on your podcast, maybe other than yourselves. But thank you for the flatters.
We're
Well,
thrilled
we're
to have
so
you.
glad to have you on. And I think Jamie was just getting to the point of, kind of tell us about how you got to London to begin with. So let's start with that, and then how you got into the flex industry overall.
Well, I'll flip that in my answer. I got into flex industry when I left Georgia. I moved to Washington, D.C. and started working for IWG for my sins. And I was there for a couple of years on their management team, and then fell in love with the flex industry and how we support entrepreneurs. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. So after being in DC for 7 years, I moved to the UK to team up to spin out a company from an existing company. It was an online booking platform. I was there as the first employee, the CEO for 3 years. When I exited that, decided to stay in the UK. My wife and I love to travel. And so being in London, with Europe in your back door, you can go anywhere in Europe for the weekend. It was hard to pass up. And I still had some business ideas that I wanted to try. And so, so I've stayed around and had a couple of companies over here now.
I mean, the latest, I mean, you're in the middle of kind of a new brand rollout for the podcast, right? I think you changed some stuff there over the years. You've made a transition on your overall professional brand as well. So let's talk through that a little bit. And I mean, you've kind of become a branding expert as you love to talk about, the hat and just different things that you use that work for you.
Absolutely. I think brand has never been more important in our industry than it is today. I've been a big fan of brand for quite some time. When I decided to stay after exiting that other company, I set up the Bold brand. I still got some of the swag with me. And we launched a co-working branded platform that partnered with landlords back in 2016, 17, crazy times. And we ended up getting acquired in 2019 by a larger operator and stayed in that structure for about 3.5 years. During that time, I launched the very first season of then the Work Bold podcast because it was aligned with that brand. And, at the time, we just wanted to answer a lot of the questions that the landlords we were talking to were having. They could sign WeWork up for a 20-year lease at above market rates, and they got hooked on that white powder there for a bit. But, we said there's another way. WeWork's taking all the margins out of your building, and we can partner with you. So we had a lot of objections to that at the time. And I know, Gio, you and I just did a podcast on my end where we talked about these partnerships. And back then it was a different world. They didn't want to talk about management agreements and sharing the upside and the downside. They just wanted to lease. And WeWork was happy to give it to them. And so was IWG and many others, of course. But when I came out of that structure, I wanted to continue having these conversations in a podcast format. So I had to rebrand it. and initially rebranded it for 2 seasons as the CalebParker Show, very humbly named. But it needed a segue, it needed the transition period to go to Brave Ideas, and now it is called the Brave Ideas Podcast, aligned with Brave Corporation and what we're doing now.
Wait, what are you doing now?
So
I have this problem too. I'm like, Gio, people think we're professional podcasters, and like some people have like no idea what we actually do to serve the industry. So I would love to know.
It's always weird, like going on someone's podcast when you host them, because you're used to asking a few questions and not. I'll probably talk more than I should on my podcast, but I don't talk as much as now I'm in the hot seat. And
Exactly. It's
I'm literally got sweat coming down over here, or literally, I should say. What do we do now? So Brave, we have a couple of threads to it, and in my delusions of grandeur, I like to think I'm building $1 billion corporation. So I always say we have a few different threads. We have Brave Capital, which works as an operating partner for equity to identify acquisition opportunities, and then manage that acquisition process, go through the development management repositioning, and then we launch the asset repositioned with multi-use, hospitality-led, brand-led hospitality, and then Brave Hospitality comes in and operates it. And there's a few different structures around how we can set that up depending on the owner and what their needs are, whether that's a joint venture or management agreement or some sort of hybrid lease. And then we have our media arm, Brave Ideas, which is our podcast, our newsletter, our events. And that really came to be with the legacy podcast coming in, really answering questions about the industry and helping drive best practice forward and amplify everybody's ideas that are doing really cool things. And so that's what we do. We are focused on the UK and Europe, but there are some US projects that we're looking at. We like the US. We want to be the US. I want to be in the US, but we're here in the UK right now.
Okay. Is your wife British, or I didn't know you were married? This is completely new news to me.
Yeah, wow. Okay. We just celebrated 14 years.
Dang. Nice.
Married at 18 together. She's not British. She's American. She's from New York, grew up in Queens. We happened to meet just passing through my hometown one night, and then we spent 7 years in DC together.
Oh, wow. Okay. And then she went to London with you, I presume. Or maybe that's how you stay happily married. She still lives in DC.
Well, she travels a lot more than I do. And she just came, she was in Chile for two weeks, and she just came back yesterday. And this morning she went to Nice. She's at a conference. So
yeah, I kind of want her job.
What is how you keep a heavy material, I guess.
I'm just saying.
But no, we do live here together.
Okay. I feel like
I think what throws you off is he looks so young.
He looks really young, but also you post prolifically on LinkedIn, lots of photos, but have you ever posted a photo of you and your wife on LinkedIn?
On LinkedIn?
See, I haven't either.
Twice.
Okay.
I would say I post more of our pictures together on Facebook, which is sort of closed to my friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Instagram.
Instagram. I've seen her in a bunch of that.
We're not friends on Instagram. We'll have to change that. I'd like to see your wife and know. Yeah, I need to know the broader Caleb. No. Okay, well, great. I love that. Wait, what does she do for work?
She's in comms. So she spent 12, almost 15 years in journalism around the pharmaceutical industry, drug development, sort of covering the FDA approval process, but then coming over here to Europe and doing the same thing over here.
Okay.
But she's moved out of journalism into comms. So she's been head of comms for a Finnish pharmaceutical company. She was head of media relations for a French pharmaceutical company. Wow. Now she's freelancing.
Nice. Okay, so she's entrepreneurial now too. Does she care that you're famous?
She would not say that I'm famous.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm definitely not famous.
She would just like you to empty the dishwasher. She does not care that you have a big following on LinkedIn.
Dishwasher, trash, compost, recycling.
Those are your jobs.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Wait, I had one other question about, now I can't remember what it was. Wait, wife, equity. Okay, it'll come back to me. Gio, you can go next.
Let's talk about your team, because one of your team members has actually been on the podcast, who I mentioned earlier. Ian was on the podcast and he's part of your team. So let's kind of talk about your team and how you kind of put the Avengers force together to kind of launch this. And so I mean, Ian's great. We thought,
Wait, yes, and is that pretty recent? I'm just a giant fan of Ian.
I'm a giant fan of Ian. He's
Yeah.
fantastic. He and Rachel are both fantastic, superb. It's interesting. So I met Ian sort of during that black hole of COVID, and we connected sort of via LinkedIn, and then somehow we got together at the Hoxton and met and started talking about hospitality and workplace and all this stuff. And at the time, I was still within that last structure with Bold, and I just kind of stuck with me. So when I started thinking about what I wanted to do now, I called him up, was bouncing ideas off of him. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And then it's kind of doing the same thing with Rachel. We met through Anthony Slumber's course around space as a service, and bouncing ideas off of her. She's based in Paris. She's another American in Europe. She's been in Paris for about 20 years. And she was coming up to London occasionally. So we'd have a breakfast and talk about spreadsheets and models and stuff. And anyway, one day, of course, one day I was talking to Ian, and it's like, would you like to go on this journey with me? And he's like, I think so. And then I was talking to Rachel another day and was talking the same thing. And then finally I was like, you guys need to meet. And so we all had a call and virtually, which is, I always find it kind of ironic, but also fitting, because I'm a big fan of the plus not versus in this whole debate between office and remote. And here we are building a real estate company, and we're 3 co-founders in 3 different cities. But anyway, so Rachel, her background is in real estate investing. She's done 2 billion euros of transactions under her belt with Carlyle Group, Oaktree Capital, LaSalle Investment Managers, Rachel Lupiani. And Ian, of course, Ian Miner, he has a background in hospitality, members clubs, launched the co-working brand for Hoxton Hotels in Ennismore. Fantastic. And I think just the 3 skill sets coming together of the financial and the investment, and then the operations and hospitality and whatever I do, it just kind of fits all together, and it becomes a nice dynamic trio, not duo, trio.
I love that. It's so it's like I think finding partners, team members, it's complicated, right? And it's easy to get it wrong. And it's easy to find people who are just like you, who have the same passion and energy, but you each bring something different to the table. Okay, I have to meet Rachel. I didn't know who she was. I just looked for her on LinkedIn. She and I went to the same business school. She was 2 years after me. Or like she left when I got there. Or no, I left when she got there. So
Okay.
I'll have to have you connect the 2 of us. I would love
Yeah, of course.
to say hello.
And
I don't think
so
I've met her. Have I met her?
I don't
Probably
think
not.
so.
Yeah.
She would say, so funny, because she's in London this week. We've got lots of meetings during the day, and she was texting me earlier what she's doing tonight. But she would tell you that she doesn't like to go on video. She doesn't do podcasts. She's more like
Behind the scenes.
kind of behind the scenes. But
Yep.
But then she's like becoming a social butterfly while she's in London. So I was like, oh yeah, it's in there it is. But to your point, Jamie, we do bring these different skill sets together. But the one thing that we all share is we've all worked. Hope I can say this. We've all worked with assholes in the past, and we all. I had this conversation with Ian one day and Rachel a different day about how building a company, we don't want to work with assholes. We want to build the company that we want to work for, right?
Yeah.
And we 3 of us share this ethos. And so now when we talk to partners or when we talk to landlords, if we quickly get a feeling of like
The asshole filter is on.
we're just like, no, it's not for us.
I think that's such a big part, is enjoying. I mean, at the stage the 3 of us are in our careers, we get to pick and choose who we want to work with. And I tell people that all the time is I want to enjoy what I do. I want to enjoy, because what we get to do isn't easy, right? We're advising people and, and really advising them from a personal and professional standpoint. And so it's hard if you're not aligned with someone personally to help and understand them professionally. And so that's such a big part for me, is I really do care about all the people I do business with, whether they be service providers like yourselves or whether they be operators that I represent or anything else. And so I think that's such an important part, to surround ourselves with that.
Absolutely. In business, I've had bad business partners where we just weren't aligned. And so we spent a lot of time up front just talking about alignment, what our values are. Do we want to grow something for 5 years and exit? Do we want to build something for long term? And we all agree we want to retire from this. We want to build, we set up the business in a structure in a way that there's certain things that might exit, but the business, the top code business is an evergreen strategy for us. And that's a big area where you need to be aligned on, right? Anyway.
So there's your first one. So when you look in the mirror at, how old are you at this point?
46.
46. So you're the same age as me. So at 46, when you look in the mirror, I mean, what are the things
You're
that
46?
I'm 46.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. When you look in the mirror, what are the things that make you happy with the man that you've become, the person you've become in general?
I was having this similar debate conversation with one of my best friends. He's a mentor and a best friend. And today I've kind of got to the point where I really want to be happy with where I am, but also not settle with where I am because I've got big goals. And it's a balancing act to try to be aware of the wins and the losses and not let either one of them get you up or down too much and focus on it. But while you're focusing on the big stuff, also live in the moment. And it is very hard. So it's a difficult question. I think, I guess I strongly believe in nuance in life. And I think I grew up with a black and white regimented, like this is how things are. Grew up in the South, very conservative. And so, there's a saying, say you outgrow your raisins or something like that. And so, I think today I try to hold space for all different perspectives. And sometimes they're both right. And there's probably some right in all the thinking. And that perspective, not always perfect in that way, but that perspective that I hold is probably the thing that I'm most proud of. And sometimes it's a strength and sometimes it's a weakness.
So I got the opportunity, Jamie, back to you not being in a circle of friendship yet. I got the opportunity to listen to your eulogy for your father a few years back that you posted. And so what role did he play in where you are today?
I would say he was my moral compass. He's still my moral compass. And he was a very loving father who'll give you the sharpest back, but he was also very black and white. And there were times, which is interesting, right? It's uncensored, so I'm going to probably share some of this stuff. And I don't think he would mind me saying this, but when I grew up, like this is going to be like socio-economical, like, controversial maybe. Where I grew up in the South, and he was like, okay, anti-homosexual, anti-interracial relationships, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? And then when I was getting to become a teenager somewhere, some of the things that he was teaching me just naturally didn't feel like it was the right thing. And even though my religious side of me was taught this one thing, it just felt it maybe wasn't 100% right. And then if I fast forward to when he was, probably about 6 years, 7 years before he passed away, across the street from him moved a Jewish woman, and she built a house for herself and her daughter, who was lesbian, and had her wife moved in, right? And when they told me this, I thought, this is going to be an interesting dynamic, knowing how I grew up and what I was taught. And then all of a sudden, he became best friends with them. He would have them over to have beers and watch football, and they had just the best time. And then when they moved away, missed them. And it really, I don't know what it taught me exactly, but it taught me something. That my dad was this way for so long in my mind, in my perception, but he wasn't really that way in his heart. And one day he told me, I don't know if he want me to tell this, but one day he told me that, and he could drink some beer, right? He could drink some beer. And one day when he was drinking some beer, he told me, he's like, and my mom had passed away by then. He was lonely and all this stuff. He's like, I met this woman up at the grocery store, and she's really nice, but she's a black woman. And I said, okay, if she's really nice, have a good time. Talk to her, whatever. He said, when I was younger, I had I was attracted to one of my schoolmates who was a black woman, but I couldn't do that to my parents. And I was like, you know what a shame that was, that he had that perspective back then. So I guess back to your question, and maybe I'm being very uncensored here, but back to your question, I think what I've learned from him over the years is that, there's a lot of nuance to life.
Yeah.
And things aren't always black and white.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, it's funny. I sent this quote to one of the guys I mentor, and it says, life really does begin in our 40s. Up until then, we're just doing research. Right. And so that's such a big part of it, because even as you were talking about your dad when you were young, he was probably about our age now. Right. And so I think it's so important to, especially where we are, you started the conversation, so we'll continue it, but where we are today in our socio-political environment and world, to just really meet people where they're at and love them where they're at. I think that's the most important part. And people know that and feel that, regardless of we always agree with them. It's hearing each other out, because I love having debates or heated conversations from the standpoint as a challenger, as an aide. It makes me better, right? Because it causes me to think about my position personally and professionally, right? It also causes me to have to defend my position. And so it's so interesting. And, we'll bring it back to the professional side on this, but even as we start having conversations as, what do we call what we do, right? Is it all encompassing under one umbrella, right? Is it all under co-working or space as a service or executive suites? Or is it all, some type of flexible workspace type solution, right? And so I think we're in this debate right now. Not only what do we call it, but what does it end up being? And so I think that's where good conversations like this help us become better, is really understanding what's going on in the environment, what conversations are we having, and what do they lead to ultimately. And I think that's what I love about having conversations with people like you or our friends over in Australia or Asia or other places, is you guys are in a different space socioeconomically and professionally from the standpoint of how y'all receive flex, right? Is we're just now getting to the point where we're starting to see different product types. You guys are further down that spectrum. And so it's always so interesting to have those conversations, because they overlap back to what you were just talking about too. And so, kind of, first of all, thank you so much for your vulnerability and your trust on that, and really living the uncensored part, because it does make a difference. I think too often we sidestep a lot of these conversations. So thank you for that. But, kind of talk about how brave ideas and what you guys are trying to do with Rachel and Ian and yourself is how's that different from what other service providers, if you will, other operators in the space are doing?
Well, I guess we don't really focus so much on being different in that way. We believe that the people coming in and working in office buildings today do it for different reasons than they used to. We believe that, like everybody in our industry believes people should have choice on when and how and where they work for what purpose. But I think where we start is in the values. And, we strongly believe that the world is made better by people who are trying to make a positive impact on the world. Entrepreneurs, innovators, and people that rally around those missions and purposes of those companies, right? And so we want to create places that help support those companies' growth from when they start to however they grow. And so one of the first things we said is that when we launch a building, maybe we have 1,000 or 5,000 people that can work in that building. They're not going to be in the building every day, and we accept that. And we actually support that. But how can we support that? How do we support them beyond our four walls? So one of the things that we put on our agenda was to create a network that our customers could tap into beyond our four walls, so that we can support them wherever work takes them. If we can't raise an unlimited amount of money and be in every single market. Maybe one day if we're lucky, we'll be in, a few continents or a few cities even. But there are other operators out there. There are other landlords out there that are delivering a level of service that's going to be on par with what we deliver. So instead of competing, why don't we collaborate? And so to support those customers. So that's one thing. I think the other thing is because of the impact that people that we want to support, the impact they're making. If you think about a startup, an entrepreneur or co-founding team that sets up, when they start hiring their team members, those early team members probably join because they are passionate about the purpose and the why of that company. And so the CEO doesn't have to really worry about where those people are working or when they're working because they can trust their, if you look at all the volunteerism that takes place, my wife, for instance, she's big on animal rescue, right? She works nights and weekends helping rescue animals get adopted. And she doesn't get paid for it, but it's a passion of hers. The rescue centers don't call and check on her and make sure she's getting the shit done. They know that she is, right? And so I think the same analogy can be said for like the startups. And so as a company grows, though, the further you get away from that CEO, maybe that employee gets a little bit further away from that purpose and mission. We believe that it's our job to help that company keep that culture together. And that means different things to different people, but we really want to lean into that to understand what makes our customers' cultures tick, and we want to support it.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think that's the beauty of it is when we're passionate about something, we go above and beyond. And I think the three of us can say, I'll put it a different way than you did. Our job is to keep entrepreneurs away from the shiny objects that steer them away from what their true business plan and strategy are. And that doesn't mean, I tell people all the time, it doesn't mean it can't change, but let's sit down and have a conversation as to why we're changing the strategy behind it. I mean, I know, Jamie, you deal with a lot with this with your startup school and some of the conversations there. How do you kind of help them get realigned?
Oh, geez. I mean, Caleb, you're trying to help people. Your thesis is that workplace matters, right? And bringing people together and maintaining a culture matters. And you're trying to enable that. I mean, you're trying to and to some extent, create a solution for the entrepreneur who wants that for their company and to have it be compelling. And I'm guessing to create an experience that the entrepreneur is never going to, or at that point, I mean, you're describing a period of time that's maybe a little past the startup stage where, where the company has its own culture and maybe wants its own space, but wants access to hospitality and community and experience and, people want to show up to. I mean, that's kind of what I'm thinking is as people get a little further from the mission, they start to care about the other aspects. And so, they may need some motivation to come together and be with their team. But you're also like allowing the senior leadership of a company to just stay focused on building the company and not building the rest of it. And I'll flip it back to kind of a Caleb question. Caleb, what does that look like? Like for you, what does hospitality look like, and how do you support the experiences that you're creating with technology?
Well, I think the experience is a good word. And if we add human to that, the human experience, the workplace is a human experience. The office is a human experience. And I think the difference between today and what we used to know is that we don't need it every day. We don't need to be, everybody's different. So some people might want it every day, but we don't need to be sitting next to our colleagues every single day anymore with technology and blah, blah, blah. So if you're beyond that startup stage where now you're recruiting talent, it's a little bit maybe disconnect is the wrong word, but maybe further down the chain from the purpose. They shouldn't be actually, but if they are, can the workplace and the choice to go there be an amenity and a talent attraction tool?
Yep.
But in the experience, there's what I call hardware and software. The hardware is everything you see. How many media rooms, how many food and dining experiences are there? Is there a podcast studio? What does the design look like? How many seats are there? That's all the hardware, everything you see when you walk in. The software is the feeling you have when you walk in and when you walk out. And that's delivered through hospitality. That's delivered through very intentional design. That's sometimes delivered to the aroma that you walk in and smell, whether it's cinnamon buns in the oven or this beautiful hotel aroma that you're used to smelling when you walk in now. But it's also something we can't control as workplace operators, but we can absolutely influence, and that's the culture in the company. So this past Friday, we hosted an event called Culture First, Leading the Way in Commercial Real Estate, and the focus was on asking the question: how can we in real estate and our industry become a beacon for positive company culture? Because to me, lockdowns in the past, remote work today, those aren't the big threats to the office. Bad company culture is.
Yeah.
Because if people have a choice, then they're not going to go in. And if they
Right.
don't go in, the
They'll
offices aren't as
avoid.
valuable, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So you have to create an experience to support all that. But we want to be encouraging through curation of events and content. We want to be encouraging our customers to have great company cultures. So we brought in Steven Shedletsky, who is a colleague of Simon Sinek's in the past, big fan of Simon. But Steven has a book called Speak Up Culture. You might see it over there. You could probably can't see this at a blur, and he's really talking about the fact that when you're in the office, that face-to-face amplifies the trust that we have with our teams, but it also amplifies the anxiety, or has potential to. So, if somebody has to speak up about something, sometimes it's harder to do that face-to-face than it is through an email or a Zoom call. So he talks about as a leader, your whisper is a shout. And, it's just very impactful stuff, right? And why are we talking about this? Well, because if we have great company cultures in our buildings, then our buildings will be filled with happy people.
Yeah.
Therefore, our buildings will be more valuable.
Yeah. More compelling, all the things. I'm curious what is the scale of your buildings? And when you talk about, when you mentioned sort of creating an external network, what does the internal network look like? I mean, are you guys kind of playing that role in sort of ecosystem,
Yeah.
building connectivity in terms of community? I'd love to just hear your view on that.
So first I'll say it's still early days. We are at the foundation of building everything. We spent the last year, 18 months building the foundation, kissing a lot of frogs on the equity side, meeting a lot of good people that weren't ready yet, that sort of stuff. But if I give you an example of what we call our home of the brave, the home of the brave, I know.
America, I love that. Yep.
in UK, right? Coincidental, by the way. We're not going to be red, white, and blue colors, but anyway, so 100,000 square foot building, for example, you might have a event space and speakeasy bar underground, and you might have a spa and a gym. You have dining experience on the ground. You have co-working, serviced office or executive suites, managed office, traditional lease. It's sort of a full stack. It's publicly out there, full stack. It's on our website, what we're doing. We won't be the only ones doing sort of this thing, but I think what will set all of us apart is when we really double down on our brand and put our values at the front and center of our brand. So the experience itself is a place that people want to come to, but they may not come in every single day. But when they come in, it's for intention and it's a cool experience for them. And they probably go take some selfies or something, hopefully. And then as we have those locations, which is a premium experience in key markets, key cities, so capital cities and secondary cities, we wouldn't, it's like, not that we're Ritz-Carlton or anything, but you would put a Ritz-Carlton in a rural town. We wouldn't be in a rural town, but we'd absolutely need to be in a capital city, downtown area or around. But at the same time, because it's 100,000 square feet sort of proposition, it does scale up and down a little bit, but we wouldn't have in London or New York, we wouldn't have 50 sites, because, like a WeWork might or an IWG might, because they're coming in taking 20,000 square feet on a lease. We're not doing that. And yes, of course, we're going to give our customers access to all of our locations. They'll buy a membership at one and then have access to the rest in some sort of way. And then through our app and our network in markets that we're not in, they'll have access to our partners. So we partner with Clockwise in the UK. So in Manchester and Leeds, our customers can tap into those locations. I'd like to think that, when we're ready, when we have customers ready to come to Canada, we'll partner with Kane over at IQ. Love Kane. He's great.
That's great.
So yeah. And it's, to me, the collaboration aspect of it is important. It's about not being a marketplace and competing with Liquid Space, friends with Mark and those guys. It's about curating a network that's on par with the same quality and service standards that we're delivering. So our customers know what to expect when they go in. It's like the airlines, right?
What about your non-flex customers within the building? How do they play into the sort of ecosystem? Like, are they included or not?
Yeah, everybody in the building will have a membership to the
Okay.
building.
Okay.
So
Okay.
if they're
Interesting.
JP Morgan and they have 10,000 square foot floor, that's
Yep.
their own space, they still have a membership. All
Okay.
their team members have a membership to the building, the app, and have access to our network.
Okay. Got it. Okay.
Unless JP Morgan says, I don't want those locations on my network.
Sure.
we might curate that for them.
Yeah. I mean, but that's really interesting. I mean, I can't think of an example of that in the States yet. Like, I belong, you know what I mean? The
I think
buildings.
didn't
Yeah, do you have
Denver
one?
didn't Denver come up with some sort of like a couple of co-working operators created a network in Denver?
Yeah. But
Yeah.
your example is quite different in that it's the whole building, right? So
Oh,
to
right.
your point, JP Morgan's included and they have a traditional lease. That's I think I'm curious if that's the future. And you're sort of saying like, well, that's what you're going to do and the experience that you're going to create, because I don't see that happening here. It's still pretty segmented in a building.
The challenge is, well, there's a general challenge at a macro level industry wide with financing flex. We talked about
Yep.
that on our podcast, Gio. And I think that'll get solved in the next 5, maybe 10 years, but yeah, that's going to get solved. But then there's the other challenge of, even if you've got that solved, how do you create a network? And I think we're going to see a few big players create the IHG, Hilton, Marriott model. Will that be us? I don't know. It's too early to tell, but we can't have 4,000 locations around the world and buy all the buildings.
Yep.
There's just not enough. It might take us 100 years to do that. We might, but in the next 10 years, we'd be lucky if we're at 100, right?
Yep. Makes sense. Okay, Gio.
So what do you think the next 6 months look like in our industry? I mean, we've seen some big mergers, acquisitions. I mean, the Yardi Hubble acquisition was obviously a UK acquisition in addition to DeskPass. Obviously, Industrious was big news across the entire globe. Kind of what do you see as the next 6 months if you were to say 3 big things that you foresee?
So there's this network that's come out in the UK called the Workspace Intelligence Network. It's about 250 different locations, maybe 15 brands across London. And what they've done is you said star report previously.
Yeah.
So they want to have this sort of Smith Travel Research star report for the industry to be able. So you buy in as a member brand, and you put in your operational data, and then they anonymize it and spit it back out, and you've got benchmarks. So if you open up a new site, or if you want to look at how you're doing compared to the market, so they've started that. I think we're going to see more of that. That'll grow, but I think we'll see more. I think Instance working on something. They acquired Coworking Intel to be able to deliver sort of this data service. I think the Yardi, WeWork, there's going to be a lot of data that can come out of that. CBRE Industrious, there can be a lot of data that comes out of that. I think it's going to take longer than 6 months to really perfect it, though. So I think if I had to say within 6 months, another big one will make an announcement to say how they're going to deal with the data. Now, how we all get access to it, and does it become publicly available or commercially available to lenders and investors? I hope so. I've got on the CBRE thing, I've got is Industrious going to die a slow death, or is CBRE going to get eaten by Industrious and then it becomes a big giant monster? I hope the latter, and I really hope, because they have so much data under that, I really hope that they do something really good for the industry and take all the data of the performance data and make that available so we can have some proper benchmarking. Now, obviously, it's one brand, but if we got the other networks coming out there, it's a huge opportunity to unlocking the finance for Flex.
Yeah, back to leadership, it has to start somewhere, right? And so I think that's a big part of it, because having the data and then, your partnership with Return Suite and the ability to figure out what is the value, how do you value these? And I think that's what we're still trying to figure out. How does the capital markets value the Flex business? And how do we find that stability?
you ask any landlord today, they want a lease still.
Hmm.
Even if they're leaning into delivering flex themselves,
Sure.
they would rather take a lease than deliver flex themselves. Great Portland Estate, GPE here in the UK, they're like got this massive 1 million square foot goal of flex, and they can see the performance in the increased NOI and all this good stuff from it. But I guarantee you, if BP or somebody walked in and gave them a lease, they'd take a lease. If WeWork came back and said, "I'll take a lease," they'll take a lease.
No,
Okay.
without a doubt. All right, go for it, Jamie.
Caleb, you are out with your team and you're having some fun and you're doing karaoke. What is your karaoke song?
Well, I think everybody knows that already.
I
You
don't
don't
know.
know that.
Nope.
Okay. Ice Ice Baby.
Oh, okay. Got
There's
He's
a
it.
got video
just
he's gonna
posted
share.
of me doing it.
He has a video. Is this on LinkedIn?
Yeah.
I'm
Somewhere.
missing the all the good posts on LinkedIn. Okay, great. Good to know. Thanks for joining us, Caleb.
Pleasure.
It's
Pleasure.
been fun to get a little uncensored with you.
Well,
I love listening to the podcast, and it's very business focused, and it's good to get to the personal side of Caleb. And our paths don't cross in person. When I'm gonna have to go to a Juicy London or something.
Or just go to the next GWA thing that Jill organizes, and
Well,
we're
I'll
all
be in
together.
Chicago for sure. So
Okay.
yeah,
Juicy,
are you gonna come over?
GWA. Are you doing Juicy Boston?
Yeah, you're gonna be there.
It's maybe. It's a maybe.
Okay.
It was a no, but it's a maybe now.
Oh, okay, good.
I've got it.
Okay.
I'm in Lipham just a couple weeks before in South France, so I'm trying to figure out how to fit it
How
up.
to
Fit it all
make
in.
both of them happen. I know it's a lot. Exactly. Yeah, and then you don't get any work done when you're at conferences. So that's the thing.
Yeah,
Podcast.
but it's okay. It's good to see people.
It is good to see people. Okay, awesome. Thanks for doing this, Caleb.
Thanks for having
Thank
me.
you so much.
Love the work you guys do as well.